Hey everybody, a little while ago I watched a really great TikTok by someone who was doing her clinical masters in psychology in Australia. She made some really good points about why studying a clinical masters in psychology can feel a little bit like a scam, and I'm gonna leave a link to her video down below. In this video today, I want to delve more into her arguments and give my 2 cents. I also want to counterbalance her perspective with a little bit more hope and optimism for students coming into the discipline with why I think psychology is still worth pursuing, especially if you're passionate about this area of study. I'm also hoping that this video will continue the conversation about how psychology can improve as a discipline. So with all of that said, let's get into the video. So there's 2 parts to her argument that I think are really important to highlight. Let's delve into the first one, where she argues that psychology does have this element of classism. And some people watching this might say, yeah, but going to university in itself is inherently classist, because there are a lot of people in the world who do not have the opportunity to go to university. But what makes psychology a little bit more unique is that you have to get really high grades in order to get into a postgrad program. Only psychology students are going to relate to this kind of pressure. Not only is it stressful and competitive, but if you need to support yourself financially on top of all of this, it's a recipe for burnout. And this is just during your undergrad and honors. After all of this hard work, if you are able to get into a clinical master's program, which is projected onto students as the best pathway to get into, universities then start actively encouraging students to cut down on their hours of work or not even have a part-time job. I've even heard that some universities actually make you sign a contract promising that you're not going to work. And look, I can kind of get this from the university's perspective. They want students to focus on their studies. They don't want their students to burn out. They want them to prioritize self-care because that is so important in this job. But for applicants that come from a disadvantaged background, or for applicants who do need to work to support themselves, it means that financially a clinical master's in psychology might not be feasible for them. And it also means that universities lose out on diversity in this discipline. The other interesting point made was that if you are able to jump through all of these hoops to get into a clinical master's program, we're talking 25, sometimes only even 15 applicants out of thousands who've applied being accepted, you feel really lucky and really grateful to be there. Even though it's likely raking up your HECS debt, you have to study full-time and you might not be allowed to work a part-time job. On top of all of this, you have to do unpaid work placements. This is like work experience that the university will set up with different organizations, and typically a clinical master's student will do 2 placements working as a provisional psychologist, where they do not get paid for that work. Meanwhile, there's actually a lot of jobs out there for people doing the 5+1 pathway, where during that 1 year working in their internship, they do get paid for working as a provisional psychologist. Plus, the job market is in provisional psychologists' favor right now, because there's a shortage of provisional psychs due to the 4+2 pathway shutting down. So for a clinical master's student doing unpaid work as a provisional psychologist, you can see why this would leave them feeling a little bit used. Okay, now let's come back to the argument, keeping in mind these 2 important points. Is clinical psychology in Australia a scam? Don't get me wrong, the financial burden of clinical psychology students is really, really tough. It's one of the reasons that I've avoided doing a clinical master's at this point in my career. And I absolutely agree that psychology does need to continue playing an active role in changing this discipline and profession to make it more accessible. But we can't deny that the discipline of psychology has been trying to change. Over the last few years, we've seen 2 master's programs pop up at the University of Melbourne and the Australian National University, allowing students to go from their undergrad straight into a master's program, skipping their honors year, cutting down their study from 6 to 5 years to get their registration. On top of this, we've also started to see bridging programs pop up, where psychologists who already have their general registration can do a 1-year clinical master's to get their clinical endorsement. In my opinion, this is much more sustainable than students doing their undergrad, honors, then a clinical master's all in one hit to get that qualification. I would be advocating for students to either take their time with their studies, get some more life experience, work experience, save up some money, or just just aim to get their registration as a psychologist and then get their clinical endorsement masters through a bridging program down the track. But this is just my opinion, and I do acknowledge that it's a really individual choice. A lot of other factors come into it, and at the end of the day, you've got to do what's best for you. The final thing that I want to say is that once you get your endorsement as a clinical psychologist, you have really high earning power, especially if you start your own business. I made a whole other video on this, so go and check it out. Basically, you go from this extreme where you're earning very little money to then being able to earn in the 6 digits. It's kind of scary how big this jump is, and I do think it's why some clinical psychologists can feel a little bit of imposter syndrome because they can charge a lot. Being able to earn a decent salary in psychology is also specific to Australia. Our government does give a lot of support to psychologists through a high Medicare rebate. So let's start to wrap this up. I guess in sum, doing a clinical master's in Australia can be really tough financially. Once you do get that degree though, it does set you up very well financially. This is why, in my own opinion, I feel that it's kind of hard to say if studying psychology, particularly clinical psychology in Australia, is a scam. I definitely think that it still has a long way to go in improving conditions for students 100%. But I really want to emphasize that it has made a lot of progress, especially in the last 5 to 10 years. And look, my hope is that by shining a spotlight on these issues, we can continue the conversation and we can get universities aware of the issues that students are talking about. So please leave your thoughts down below. I would love to hear what you have to say. Let's keep this conversation going. That's everything from me for now. As always, I hope that you have a lovely week and I will see you in another video. Okay, bye!